this is Debbie Puertollano, and today I'm going to discuss about reader response literary criticism. Are you ready to listen to me? Alright, sounds good. The ultimate goal of reader response criticism is to increase our understanding of the reading process by investigating the activities in which readers engage, the effects of those activities, and their interpretations. Alright, so contrary to the popular belief, reader response criticism is not anything goes theory. Instead, it is a theory that uses specific tools that help us analyze our response and the response of others. So, you may partake in reader response criticism even when you do not realize that you are, because anytime an essay analyzes the act of reading or reader's response, one could classify that essay as reader response criticism. Alright, can you still follow me with that? Thank you so much for the good feedback. So let's go ahead and proceed. Reader response theorists believe that readers actively make meanings as they read and that the reader's role is important when understanding literature. They also believe that a written text is an event that only occurs within the reader. So I'm going to discuss to you one of the experts about reader response, and his name is Tyson. According to Tyson, reader response criticism can be divided into 5 categories. Alright? Transactional reader response theory is the first one, which is often associated with the work of Louis Rosenblatt. So he is also one of the experts when it comes to reader response. He analyzes the transaction between the text and the reader. According to Rosenblatt, in order for this transaction to occur, we must read in the aesthetic mode, which allows for us to develop a personal relationship with the text. Alright? So, it is encouraged the judgment and focuses our attention on the emotional subtitles or subtleties of its language. Wolfgang Iser believes that in order to interpret a text, one must use the text itself as a guide. Alright, so let's go ahead and proceed to the second theory about reader response. So it is the affective stylistics theory. So affective stylistics is a slow motion, phrase by phrase analysis of how the text structures the reader's response. It is used to understand how the text, which does not have a fixed meaning, affects the reader in the process of understanding. So, Stanley Fish, one of the experts when it comes to reader response, thinks that it is important to ask the question. So, let me give you an example. Questions like, what does the sentence do to the reader? In order to determine what the text does. Affective stylistics critics show how the reader's experience is mirrored or reflect in descriptions and experiences in the text. Alright, so let's go ahead and proceed to the third one. So that would be subjective reader response theory. So subjective reader response theorists, they believe that readers' responses are the text. In other words, the text is the reader responses of the readers. According to David Bleach, believes that we the readers interpret the meaning of the text. So we are interpreting the meaning of the conceptual experiences we create in response to the text. Alright? So the next one would be psychological reader response theory. So it would focus not only what readers' interpretation says about the text, but on what those interpretations says about themselves. Norman Holland believes that we use the same psychological responses when reacting to the events in our everyday lives and when reading the literary text. Alright? The goal of interpretation is to fulfill our psychological needs and desires and to restore our psychological equilibrium. This perspective process consists of 3 stages. So the first one would be the defense mode, in which psychological defenses are raised. And the second one is fantasy mode, and it is wherein we interpret the text in a way to tranquilize those defenses. And number 3, or the third one, is the transformation mode, in which we focus on an intellectual interpretation to avoid unemotional response. Okay? Alright, thank you so much for the feedback. Let's now proceed to the social reader response theory. So, according to Stanley Fish, he said that all individuals' subjective responses are products of the interpretive community to which we belong. These interpretive communities are dynamic and determine how we will read the text in the first place. With social reader response theory, each interpretation will simply find whatever its interpretive strategies put there. Alright? So, I'm going to discuss to you one of the concepts and terms when it comes to reader response. Okay? First one, reader response criticism does not mean that all criticism is correct. I just want to highlight that. Alright? And the second one, readers actively make meaning out of text depending on who the reader is. Two readers could read the same or the same book and get two distinct meanings out of those texts depending on their social backgrounds, life experiences, and intellectual communities. Alright? So let's now proceed to the 5 headings of reader response theory. The first one would be transactional. It's gonna be according to Lewis, Rosenblatt. It analyzes the transaction between the text and the reader. Text act as a stimulus to our responses to what we are reading. Text also act as a blueprint that keeps us on track to what we are. Alright? Are we cool with that? Perfect. So, if we read, we do not steer too far away from the actual meaning. So that's the purpose. And that's the purpose of it, alright? Thank you. And afferent reading, just focusing on the information that we read in the text. So that's all about it. The reader only focuses on the facts and ideas. So there's no emotional involvement out of that. If you will say afferent reading. While aesthetic reading, we or the readers will focus on the emotional connections that we make to the characters and storylines in the text. We begin to make some judgment and put ourselves in the place of the characters. So we're gonna empathize, so there's gonna be emotional responses out of that. And there is determinate meaning. That means the facts that are given to the reader, like physical character descriptions and the dates and the names and certain events in the plot. Alright. While indeterminate meaning, these are spaces in the text that are up for interpretation. Certain events are actions that we can make out of different meanings. This gaps allows us to be creative and allows us to create our own interpretation as a reader. And we have the so-called affective stylistics. So these are the texts that are examined very closely to determine the meaning and how it affects the reader in the process of reading. According to Stanley Fish, he describes stylistics as a structure of the reader's response as it occurs from moment to moment, not the structure of the text, alright, as we might assemble it. Stylistics do not ask like, what does the sentence says or mean, but ask, what does the sentence do to the reader, or how the reader of the sentence make meaning. So that's the purpose of it. Cool? Cool. Alright, and then we have subjective. So according to David Bleach, this theory claims that reader responses are the text, and there are no literal meaning beyond what the reader infers. There is less more about the text on the page and more about the text into our mind. So we are the focus. Then we have real objects. Physical objects such as the printed pages of the text. That's going to be the focus when it comes to real objects. While symbolic objects, these are like experience created when someone reads those printed pages, much like language itself. Alright? Alright, clear. Then we have symbolization. These are the feelings, associations, and memories that occur as we read the text. And we have re-symbolization, and that is interpreting the meaning of the conceptual experiences we create in response to the text, as well as our evaluation to the text quality. That's a fraction of it. And we have psychological, and according to Norman Holland, it is our reaction to text which is heavily influenced by the same psychological responses we bring to events in our daily lives. Texts have the ability to tap into the reader's unconscious, which makes the reader dislike or like the text. While under the psychological are interpretation, it is the way a reader conceptualizes the text to restore psychological equilibrium. And then identity theme. These are the patterns of our psychological conflicts and coping strategies. Alright, and we have identity theme. It is the patterns of our psychological conflicts and coping strategies. Through this, we unconsciously recreate the text for a world that exists more realistically to us. And then we have the defense mode. It's our unconscious defenses by which a certain character or event in the text. And then the next would be the fantasy mode. We start to interpret the text that gives us a psychological equilibrium. Cool? Alright. Then let's go ahead and proceed to the next one. So it's gonna be the transformation mode. The transformation mode is wherein the reader decides to focus a more intellectual interpretation of the text in order to avoid the sometimes painful emotional responses. And then, what is social reader response? Social reader response, as discussed by Stanley Fisher, says that there is no such thing as individual subjective response. Our responses to a text are largely tied to the interpretive community to which we belong. The reader has instilled interpretive strategies from various institutions like high school, universities, churches, and these strategies shapes what the reader defines as literary text. So that's what social is. And the reader can change interpretive communities at different times in their lives. Interpretive communities have a significant impact on how Angular reader reads a text. So it's actually a point, but that's no interpretation, and therefore no form of literary criticism can claim to reveal what's in the text. That's how it says. And then informed reader, the reader who has attained the literary competence necessary to experience the text the way the author does. When we have the implied reader, the reader that the text seems to be addressing, the implied reader varies greatly from genre to genre. Then let's proceed to the outside resources. Let me discuss this to you. Ladies and gentlemen, understanding effective stylistics. Northeastern Illinois University in Chicago describes effective reader response with his or her emotional response to the text. And according to University of Toronto, effective straightforward definition with attribution to Stanley Fish that calls effective stylistics recreated in part by the interpretive strategy that the reader displays. And then we have subjective reader response theory. According to New York College of Neurochal, reader response criticism defines subjective reader response criticism as how readers interpret text, rather than focusing on the author or analysis of cues from the text. And then you can maybe check out this website. They also supply some additional things related to the reader response that may help you have further definite key terms. Alright? Cool. Or you can go ahead and check out more resources. The author, the text, and the reader discusses various points of view that can be common readers and emphasizes the role of language in creating meaning. Also importantly, describes how a reader response is affected by his or her own perception of the world. However, subjective reader response is to the text. It is the continuous shaping of the events of the reader mental process that slowly adjusts the thoughts to finally reach an understanding of the actual meaning of the text. And then, if you want to check out psychological reader response theory, you can check out to Google Books. Let the reader understand reader response criticism and the Gospel of Mark. So this book can be found from Google or the library and discuss the experience of the reader, including empirical study of reading. So it's how the psychological mindset affects readers' interpretation and development psyche, and etc. That's it. Alright, thank you so much for listening. Alright, so let's now go ahead and proceed to the reader response criticism assumption. So you can't know for sure what an author intended, and the text itself is meaningless without a reader. So the reader's response is what counts. And readers actively create rather than discourse meaning in text, guided by certain goals, and rules may be personal or shared with the other members of the community. And responding to a text is a process. Description of that process are valuable because your response may enrich another reader response. So that's the purpose of it. So we have these practices. You can read the text slowly, describe the response of an ideal reader, what is anticipated, the experiences, or you can move through the text describing your own personal response. Or you can go ahead and focus on the details and ask how the reader's response in regards to your own response would change if a detail were changed. So let's make a formal definition of the reader response criticism. So it encompasses various approaches to literature that explore and seek to explain the diversity and often divergences of readers' responses to literary works. So if we say about reader response, we have to know who Louis Rosenblatt is. He says that a poem that the reader lives through under the guidance of the text and experiences as relevant to the text. The idea that a poem presupposes a reader actively involved with the text is particularly shocking to those seeking to emphasize the objectivity of their interpretations. So that's how it sounds. Alright, folks? Are we cool with that? Yes, we're cool with that. So let's go ahead and proceed to the next one. So, according to formalists, they spoke of the poem itself, the concrete work of art. It is the real poem, and they had no interest in what the work of literature make a reader live through. And according to William K. Winsett and Monroe C. Birdsley in 1954, they used the term affective fallacy to define as erroneous the very idea that a reader's response is relevant to the meaning of a work or a literary work. So Stanley Fish says that, or wrote the literary or literature in the reader. It's the affective statistics. He wrote it on 1970. He argued that any school of criticism that sees a literary work as an object claiming to describe what it is, never what it does, misconstrues the very essence of literature and reading. Literature exists and signifies when it is read. Fish suggests that it is a force, and it's an effective one. Alright? So he's one of the cool guys. And then according to Wolfgang Iser, he argues that the text contain gaps, or you could say blanks, that powerfully affect the reader, who must explain them, connect what they separate, and create in his or her mind effects of a work that aren't in the text but are incited by the text. With the redefinition of literature as something that only exists meaningfully in the mind of the reader, and with the redefinition of the literary work as a catalyst of mental events, comes of redefinition of that reader. No longer is the reader the passive recipient of those ideas that an author has planted in the text. Okay? The reader is active, Rosenblatt. That's what he says. And according to Fish, reading is something you do. According to Iser, the reader as an effective maker of meaning. So other reader response critics define that the reader differently. According to Wayne Booth, he uses the phrase that implied reader to demean the reader, which is created by the work. And Iser says that the implied reader and the educated reader. So according to them, here it is. Since the mid-1970s, reader response criticism has evolved in variety of new forms. So according to subjectivists like David Bleach, Norman Holland, and Robert Crossman, they have viewed the reader's response not as one guided by the text, but rather as one motivated by the deep-seated personal psychological needs. According to Holland, If we read or when we read, we find our own identity theme in the text by using the literary work to symbolize and finally replicate ourselves. So we will put ourselves in the text. We work out through the text with the characters or characteristic patterns of desire. So that's what he says. Even Fish has moved away from the reader-response criticism as he had initially helped define it, focusing on interpretive strategies held in common by interpretive communities such as one comprised by American college students reading a novel as a class assignment. Fish shift in focus is in many ways of typical of changes that have been taken place within the field of RRC or reader response criticism, a field that because of those changes is increasingly being referred to as a reader-oriented criticism. So, many contemporary critics view themselves as readers-oriented critics and as practitioners of some other critical approach as well. Certain feminist and gender critics with an interest in reader response have asked whether there is such thing as reading like a woman. So, reading-oriented new historicists have looked at the way in which racism affects and is affected by reading, and more generally at the way in which politics can affect reading practices and outcomes. Gay and lesbian critics have argued that sexualities have been similarly constructed within by social discourses and that there may be a homosexual way of reading. And then nearly every reader supplies personal meanings and observations, making each reader's experiences with a work of unique, distinctive from every other reader's experience in the same. Alright, so to make sure that we're on the same page, we are going to discuss a literary piece for the reader response. So let me give you an example. It's the Romeo and Juliet. So it is about a 14-year-old girl and versus her father. And then she is almost certain to identify closely with the Juliet and will read Lord Capulet as overbearing and rigid. Her father, on the other hand, may be drawn to the poignant passage where Capulet talks with a prospective suitor, urging that he wait while Juliet has the time to enjoy her youth. To Capulet, Juliet is the hopeful lady of my earth. The young woman may interpret this another sign of Capulet's possessiveness. Her father may see it as a sign of love and even generosity. So, whose interpretation is going to be correct? The different interpretations produced by different readers can be seen as simply the effect of the different personalities and personal histories involved in constructing meaning from the same series of clues. Not only does the reader create the work of literature, in large part, but the literature itself may work on the reader as he or she reads, altering the reader's experiences and thus the reader's interpretation. Alright, so that's it. Reader response theorists believe the importance of recursive reading or reading and rereading with the idea that no interpretation is carved in stone. A second and third interactions with the text, they may well produce an interpretation. Okay? Alright. So, the reader responds various positions. So, I'm going to discuss first what is the psychoanalytic view. So, the reader responds to the care fantasies and symbolic groundwork of the text in a highly personal manner, while the text contribute material for inner realization which can be shared like paradigm symbols like that. And then the real meaning of the text is the meaning created by the mind psyche in response of the work at the unconscious level, at the subsequent conscious level, as the material provided by the text opens a path between the two, occasioning richer self-knowledge and realization. So that's what psychoanalytic view is. So hermeneutic view, on the other hand, the text means differently because the reader decodes it according to her worldview, her worldview, like her horizons, her understanding that the text may be operating with a different horizon. Hence, there is interaction between the world of the text as it was constructed and the world of the reader. The reader can be can approach the text with her own understanding, which is grounded in history. So however, the text is similarly grounded in history, and as often there is much in the histories that is shared, and well as it was is not, there is both identity and strangeness. While phenomenological view is the text functions as a set of instructions for its own processing, but is as well indeterminate, needs to be completed, to be concretized. So the reality of the text lies between the reader and the text. It is the result of the dialectic between work and reader. While a structuralist view, decoding the text requires various levels of competence, right? Competence is how the texts work in the genre, their basis as an objective socially shared reality. The meaning that depends largely on the competence of the reader in responding to the structures and practices of the text, and which operate implicitly, so they affect without knowing it. So that's how it is. And the competent reader can make this implicit. While political or ideological view, the text include statements, assumptions, attitudes which are intrinsically ideological, like expressing attitudes towards and beliefs about a certain social and political realities, like relations, the values, and power. And as a text is produced in a certain social and material milieu, it cannot have been embedded. So that's how it is. Alright? Assumptions. The reader herself will have ideological convictions and understanding, as well as often unrecognized, as it is the nature of ideology, which understandings will condition and direct the reading and the application of the reading. Alright? So, according to post-structuralist views, meaning is indeterminate. It is not in the text but in the play of language and the nuances of conventions in which the reader is immersed. Hence, the reader constructs a text as she participates in display, driven by the stabilities and meaning potentials of the semantic and rhetorical aspects of the text. Stanley Fish's view here is that the reader belongs to an interpretive community, which will have taught the reader to see a certain set of forms, and then topics and so forth, and he is the one view which refers to the world of discourse of the reader as being the determining factor. According to Tony Bennett, from a more Marxist view or position, sees readers as belonging to reading formalists or formations in various sorts of post-structuralist reading. The reading process may involve the reading or readers countering and on or resorts of post-structuralist reading, and then interpreting prevailing views, depending on various things, including the force of the direction of the text to the reader, the potential reconceptualization, freeing up the meaning the text that can affect the openness of the play of the language and meaning of the reader. Alright, so the text may deconstruct itself. The reader may experience or see that the language undermines or undermines its own assumptions. The real agent here is the small or in all post-structuralist positions being the reader upon the polysemy. It means the multiple meaning and the sliding and interplay of sides. In her own socially shared world or discourse, in the world discursively and socially constructed. And that is under Socratic, let's say, for example, Socratic discussion over the text rendering of the excerpt from The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison and My Papa's Waltz by Theodore Roethke. So let's do some debriefing here. Let's be guided by these questions. What was your perception of the excerpt from The Bluest Eye and My Papa's Waltz influenced by? Or has your perception changed due to your participation in the Socratic discussion? So we have this learning target today, alright, viewers, ladies and gentlemen. So you will or we will try to develop an understanding of reader response criticism by actively participating in our discussion right now in our TED Talk over the literary theory, as well as create notes that synthesize the information presented into organized chunks of information. So we're gonna go ahead and examine your understanding of My Papa's Waltz by Theodore Roethke by actively participating in our discussion over your perception of the piece as well as what led you to that conclusion. So let's be guided that reader response mean the search for meaning. Okay? So let's go ahead and be guided with this question. Where can the true meaning of a story, poem, or play can be found? So the answer is the true meaning can be found somewhere between the author, the text, and the reader. So that's the key points here. And then a text begins with an author. The author is the one that creates the text and the ideas, the personality, the experiences, the literature, the identity, the message, etc. So don't forget that. A text begins within the author. So the next question is, does true meaning exist in the author's mind? So the answer is the author leaves the text. Alright, that's correct. The author leaves the text for readers to explore. So that's our part as a reader. The text is the one that provides stimulus, the blueprint, the clues, the cues, the critical input, the author's ideas, and the language. Next question. The author leaves the text for readers to explore, okay? So the question is, does the true meaning exist in the text? So what do you think is the answer? That's correct. Alright. And is there one meaning waiting for discovery? So that's our question for our TED Talk. Alright? Conception of meaning. Diverse interpretations of a text meaning are determined at a basic level of different philosophical concepts of what constitutes meaning, like a cognitive message to be passed from author to the reader, or an affective or emotive response produced in readers through the experience of receiving the text. So we have so-called expected and unexpected readings. Some reader response critics classify different interpretations and responses to text as expected or unexpected readings. Unexpected reading is one in which factors extrinsic to the text seem to resist or ignore the text signals. In terms of narrative criticism, unexpected reading is one that is compatible with the response of a text implied readers, while an expected reading is one that is incompatible with the response of a text implied readers. So for example, imagine 4 different people reading the story of the Passion of the Christ. Alright? So the reader one is inspired because the story, it presents Jesus as a man of integrity who is willing to do nobly for his convictions. While the reader too is traumatized by the story because it reveals the depth of human depravity on the part of those who denounce, betray, or torture an innocent man. While the person number 3 is comforted by the story. It is because it portrays Jesus' death as an atoning sacrifice through which God offers forgiveness and mercy to the undeserving. While the reader 4 is delightful by the story because it reports the gruesome execution of a meddlesome busybody who tried to tell everyone else how they should live. Reader response critics would classify the 3 responses as expected readings. Though very different from each other, all 3 respond to cues within the text and so exemplify polyvalent responses. The critics would classify the 4th response as an unexpected reading. It responds to the story in a way that the narrative does not solicit or invite. So for example, The Lord of the Rings. The Lord of the Rings trilogy was believed by fans to be a basis of Catholic teachings. Yet it was denied by Tolkien, who insisted it was a mere fantasy with heavily linguistic analysis of Scandinavian languages. Yet, he later suggested that the criticism of these readers had merit, regardless of what he believed was his intention, and considered it as a possibility that it was subconsciously created. Similarly, many readers interpreted the trilogy to be an allegory for World War I and World War II, like Sauron and Saruman representing Germany, and Japan, respectively, what the fellowship and its nations represented. The reader encounters the text. Readers bring their personality, their language, their culture, their values, their family structure, or even experiences, education, gender, or whatnot to the text. So the reader encounters the text, and readers in general have the same question. So the question is, what does this poem, story, or novel or novelette mean? So meaning plus text plus reader, that would be the reader response criticism. So it's about the text, the meaning, and the reader. Meaning can only exist when the reader and the text interact with each other. The text alone does not have a meaning. Each reader constructs his or her own meaning for a text. All interpretations are valid as long as the reader can provide the textual evidence or support. However, there are few rules that will apply. So let me just discuss this to you. So rules like questions like, can any interpretations be correct? What if the reader has the wrong meaning? Alright, so that's what we are gonna talk about. In reader response criticism, the reader plays a big part in determining the meaning. But not all interpretations are valid. That's what I want to highlight to you. So the first rule is, do not add anything to the text. And then do not ignore parts of the text, and do not change the parts of the text. Alright? As long as the readers do not manipulate the text to fit a contrived interpretation, as long as the readers can provide the textual evidence, then any interpretations can be valid or correct. Alright? So let's say that you like happy endings, for example. You want each story to end harmoniously, and you feel that one can make you happy. So you will maybe manipulate it. So if you interpreted the ending of the story to be the positive one, just remember, are you breaking the reader response rules, or is your interpretations valid? Alright? Sorry, but not all endings are happy. Yes, you are breaking one of the reader response rules by making everything end happily. So that time, I can say that your interpretation is not valid. Regardless of how much you want to be positive, you cannot add what is not there to test in order to make the meaning ending or to make the happy ending. Alright? Thank you so much, folks, for following. Alright, so we're finished with the rule number 1. Let's go now to rule number 2. Ladies and gentlemen, do not ignore the part of the text. You're reading a story, for example, in which the main character makes his living by defrauding the elderly or stealing the retirement theory. Or, stealing the retirement money. He lies to his elderly clients who trust him and shows little remorse for his crimes. However, he demonstrates an amazing ability to empathize with disabled people and often volunteers his time and resources to help the disabled. So, rule number 2, do not ignore the parts of the text. When we write an essay about a story, you paint the character as a cold-hearted predator and never mention his concern for the disabled. If you present and only the character's crime, are you breaking one of the reader response rules, or is your interpretations valid? Sorry, but even the bad guys have attributes, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, you are breaking one of the reader response rules by ignoring the character's attributes. That time, I could say that your interpretations is not valid. Regardless of how much you dislike a character, you cannot ignore what you don't want to acknowledge. Alright? So that's a rule. Then rule number 3. Let's move on. Do not change parts of the text. So this one seems obvious. You cannot change the text. Most of the time, text changing occurs in error. Alright? Be sure you have a solid understanding of the text before interpreting it. So we have this quotation says, don't try to make something that is not. Or remember that text can have one more meaning, right, folks? Alright. So let's go ahead and move to the next one. My discussion about reader response criticism for deeper analysis. Have you heard the word polyvalence, ladies and gentlemen? Reader response critics are interested in the phenomenon of polyvalence. So, why texts mean different things to different people? They pay special attention to 4 factors that often cause readers to understand or experience text differently. So I'm gonna discuss it to you one by one. The first one is social location. The social location of a reader refers to identifying the characteristics such as the age, the gender, the nationality, the race, the health, career, social class, personality, type, and marital status. Readers who share certain aspects of social location tend to understand text in similar ways that can be distinguished from understandings produced by readers from a different social location. Alright? And then the next one would be the reading strategy. The manner in which with a text is received affects the way in which it's interpreted. For example, if a text is heard out loud, it might be understood different than if it's read silently. If a section of a text is read as a pericope, it might be understood differently than if it's encountered as an episode in a longer work. If a book is read as a part of a larger text like Bible, it might be understood differently than if it's a reader freestanding work. So it will depend on the reader. And then the empathy choice. With narrative literature, readers will experience the meaning of a story differently depending on the character with whom they must identify. Alright? So, ladies and gentlemen, with our TED Talk, I'm gonna provide you a short story so I can make sure that we have the same understanding. So that would be Young Goodman Brown by Nathaniel Hawthorne. So I'm gonna provide your reader response literary analysis. So first, I'm gonna discuss to you the characters. So Young Goodman Brown, he is a husband of Faith. He is the lead character in the story. He is the son of a very religious and reputable family in terms of goodness and pureness. While Faith, wife of Goodman, she is a young and loving wife. She is actually dependent and afraid if she don't have young Goodman Brown with her by her side. While Goody Close, she is the woman who is the spiritual advisor of young Goodman Brown. But on reality, she is portrayed as a witch. While there is a devil, he is the stranger with Goodman as they travel the forest. He is the one who accompanied Goodman on that creepy village. And the minister, he is the spiritual moralist on the story. And he is the one who leads the village. But it appears to be that he is also in the evil side. And Deacon Gookin, he is the lead to the church. He leads the church to he leads the people to the church of Salem, including Goodman Brown. Right. So since we are finished with the characters, I'm gonna give you a summary of the story. So ladies and gentlemen, have you ever have an experience wherein you're in the dream and someone's or that situation seems so real that whatever you believe that is real and right has been shaken? Or if not, as we actually grow older, like right now, and become more educated, we begin to question everything, including like the kind of society what we have right now, like the religion and how the government rules, and even our relationship with our loved ones. We begin to check what is the true and what is not, or what if whatever we believe that it is not true. That is the story of Nathaniel Hawthorne's Young Goodman Brown. Let me tell you a summary of the story, ladies and gentlemen. Young Goodman Brown is a faithful Christian and an ordinary husband to his beautiful wife, Faith. She is young. There was this one night that Goodman had to leave his wife alone in their room at Salem. His wife telling him not to go because it so happened that she is afraid of the dark and to be left alone. But he still did. Goodman just advised her to pray whenever she is afraid. Goodman then went to that creepy and gloomy forest as a man approached him. He then met a man that seems to resemble him, and that man is closely appear to be a snake. They continued to walk at this for the first time that young Goodman Brown's bloodline walked into that woods, as he said. The stranger says that Goodman and they know each other, like his ancestors, like his grandfather and father. Brown responded that it was not mentioned to him by his family, or he didn't know that. Nevertheless, the stranger said that the leaders of the church follows him, as well as the government and that is a secret actually. Brown responded that he is not involved to any of that. That he is just an ordinary married man, and that he loved his wife so much. That is Faith. As they walked through the dark, creepy forest, Goodman was shocked when he saw the people who made a big contribution to Goodman's morality. So those are the leaders, like the religious people, are gathered there. They were there, his spiritual advisor, the minister, someone named Deacon Gukin, and as they walked, Goodman saw her spiritual advisor too, named Goody Close. She is very religious, known to their village. Goodman tried to hide himself, but because he is awkward, a little bit awkward for other people to see that he is with that creepy man. But it appears that Goody is a witch, and that man he is with is a demon. So Goodman finally discovered that the man that he is an evil. That devil offers him a serpent-like wood, but Goodman refused. He was still shocked of whatever is happening. And that moment, the pure and the godly members of the society is in the dark forest doing a devil ceremony. Like they're trying to welcome a new members of that evil clan. He is thinking of his wife Faith, the one that he left alone in their home. He is the only one that is. He is thinking that Faith is the only one that is godly and pure. He saw a cloaked woman then that appears to be like resembles his wife, but he is still convincing himself that his wife wouldn't be there. Before the new worshippers of evil is baptized, Brown shouted to his wife. Brown finally discovered that it was really Faith, the woman that with a cloak, and then he shouted to his wife to resist that evil. After that, he found himself alone in that forest. So it was back to normal. But after that incident, it was a really big impact to the personality of young Goodman Brown. A lot of things changed with him, like his faithfulness towards other people, especially those religious people, toward his Christianity, as well as his love with his wife Faith. That was what happened until the end of his days. His faith was shaken from a pure religious young Goodman Brown. Let's now proceed to the critical analysis with the reader response. So the question, let's be guided with this. How does the meaning of a text change as you read it? So in my point of view, when I reread the literary piece, I have discovered a deeper meaning to what the author would like the readers to know. To be honest, the story is full of hidden meaningful meanings. That is why it is highly recommended that it would be perfect if you would reread it more than once. So given a concrete scenario, I as a reader who first read the story, I would think that the wife of young Goodman Brown, Faith, has a minor role in the story. Why? Is it because she only got a few lines and only given a chance to speak on the start of the story? Is that right? And then indeed, the story is circa Goodman walking on the woods, and as I keep on rereading the story, I was enlightened to know that Faith has a major role. So the question is why? It is because as the story moved, Goodman keeps on thinking about her. His wife is the concept of perfection and purity and goodness in the world for Brown. And as I have deeply analyzed it, when Goodman found out that his wife Faith is also involved in the evil cult, that was the moment that young Goodman Brown broke into pieces. It appears that Brown wouldn't have changed into a miserable, lifeless person he became after he went to the forest if he didn't find out that Faith is not a devil's follower too. So the next question is on the reader response is, how do your values alter your perceptions of the text? So for example, as I read the story, the values that was alter my perception of the text was this realization about our social reality. I have this value in life when it comes to good and bad. My value that we have given this privilege to choose what we believe in. I actually came from a Catholic family and graduated in a Catholic school in high school. I was an active member of our church up until now, but I have this belief that no matter how active we are in our religion, it is up to a person if he or she would apply those church teachings in their lives. So as I have read the literary piece. This served as an eye opener for me because as a reader, evil is a human nature. That's what the story would like to tell. Those church leaders commit sins as well. They are not perfect. My point is not to put those people down. What I'm trying to say here is that human beings have their own devil inside. Some people are just hiding behind those good things and do cover up. So my values here is I have reflected what I have read is that we are the ones who are choosing what we want to become or what we want to believe. Like for a concrete example, if you have experienced a heartbreak, your loved one cheated on you, the hard part here is the fact that you believe doesn't make sense anymore because what is the point of that if you can no longer be with the person you thought that is right for you? Similarly to what happened in the story, Goodman did not know how to move on. Yes, indeed, we don't know if what happened into that forest is just a dream or just a mere hallucinations of him, or if it happened in reality. But the fact that he wasn't able to cope up with what he saw, that is something that is very intriguing for me as a reader. I can totally empathize with the lead character, young Goodman Brown. And since he believed in like his family or his ancestors, his grandfathers, fathers are the purest, the righteous, and perfect in his eyes. But the fact that they are involved in those evils, as well as his wife Faith. So that's what really is moving for me. So how have the readers in different time periods or of different ages interpreted the text? As many critics have pointed out in Young Goodman Brown, it is interested in exploring the psychological and social effects of guilty knowledge, whether or not the knowledge is founded on fact. At the outset of the story, Brown is self-confident and secure in the knowledge that the world around him is what he believes it to be. He particularly cherishes the knowledge that his wife Faith is innocent and good and an angel on earth, believing that his place, heaven, is assured by his wife's goodness. Brown disregarded the consequences of making and keeping an appointment with the devil. Hawthorne presents Brown's ordeal in the forest as his first brush with evil, but it's significant, leading him to reject his previous conviction of the prevailing power of good. He's discovered that the people he admires and believes to be good Christians are actually hypocrites. So how have the readers in different time periods or of different ages interpreted the text? So Young Goodman Brown ranks foremost among Hawthorne's short stories in both popular appeal and critical respect. Readers are drawn by Hawthorne's superb storytelling technique and by the theological, the moral, psychological, social, and historical dimensions he develops in detail. The story has also had its critics. Like in the 19th century, Edgar Allan Poe wrote that the allegorical elements in the story detract from its natural form. And Henry James posted that the presentation of the forest experience as a dream constituted Hawthorne's taking the easy way out of a narrative dilemma. More recently, critics such as Frank Davidson and Leo B. Levy have explored Hawthorne's handling of Brown's emotional crisis in the story. Like going even further in this direction, Edward Jane and Michael Tritt have written extensive Freudian readings of the tale, focusing on Brown's arrested psychological development and projection of guilt. His historical context of the story continues to attract critical interest, as well with scholars delving with the Puritan belief system and 17th century American cultural values for clues to interpreting Young Goodman Brown. So 20th century critics have also become increasingly interested in the narrative technique Hawthorne uses in Young Goodman Brown, with such commentators as Harold Mosher, among others, like discussing the storytelling aspects of the tale. The ambiguous symbolism and the allegorical nature of Young Goodman Brown ensure continued interest, vigorous critical attention. So, which of the personal experiences or memories is affecting our perceptions of the story? So, in my point of view, I as a reader, my memory that is being affected in my perception in the story is the fact that I don't know whether I'm a member of the cult or member of the church, but I was shaken to realize that in reality it is normal to feel loss at some point of our lives, as what I'm experiencing right now. But the ability to cope up is what matters. If you let that nightmare consume you as a person, that would control you and eat your life. Just remember, if we all have evils and it's a human nature. So the next and the last one is, what was the work's original intended audience? To what extent are you similar or different from that? So in me reading this literary piece, I also read the autobiography of the writer. So how did he became motivated to write this masterpiece? So just to give you a heads up, the author here, Nathaniel Hawthorne, have this dilemma. He had grown up to Salem Village in year 1804. It so happened that his real life great great grandfather served as an executionist during those times that women are being accused of being a witch. So there's some witch trial in year 1962, and that great-great-grandfather of Hawthorne judges 25 women to death in real life. So Nathaniel was so affected about his family background history. That is why he put all those experiences or shameful experiences at of his neighborhood into this literary art. During the era of 19th century, people are so religious, and Hawthorne is one of those people who push the concept of free will, as I have investigated. With this, the target readers of this masterpiece are the religious and the sacred people, and actually up until now, this work is still timely and valuable since the society still believes in morality. So you can totally agree with me with that. I could say that I am similar to what the author believes in. There are a lot of temptations and imperfections in life, as I have agreed to him. What matters is how we able to live with it. If we wouldn't know how to live those misfortunes and unexpected reality and imperfections, we would be trapped in that dark, gloomy, and creepy forest. So that's all, folks. Thank you so much for staying with me with this TED Talk. I hope you have learned so much from it. And that's all for today. Thank you so much again, and have a great one. Bye for now.